pioneer and entrepreneur, a villain who wanted to kill, a practitioner of libertarianism who meant well, a criminal who did everything in pursuit of money. These are just some of the opinions surrounding the figure of Ross Ulbricht, the founder of one of the first major darknet markets where illegal goods could be ordered instantly with home delivery, paying with cryptocurrencies. The case of these men has recently returned to the spotlight, this time due to the fact that after 11 years in prison, Ross was released right after the new president of the USA, Donald Trump, pardoned him. How did it even come to this? And why exactly did Ross Ulbricht receive a sentence of 2 life imprisonments and 40 years for creating an unassuming online classified service?
And with this note, I invite you to watch. Young Ross Ulbricht grew up in Austin, Texas. Finishing high school in 2002, he then chose to study physics at the University of Dallas. Along the way, he also studied in Pennsylvania, where he worked on becoming a materials engineer. And this doesn't matter at all, because he was just a guy like many others. In fact, he didn't stand out too much from the norm and never had major problems with the law.
During his studies, he became very interested in libertarian movements. According to the doctrine of, for example, agorism, a left libertarian thought, everyone should be able to voluntarily make agreements and negotiate as they wish. In agorism, particular emphasis is placed on institutions of the so-called grey market, a market area free from state control, where no one asks anyone what, how much, and for what they paid, because everything happens through preferably untraceable transactions. And I emphasize this because his views are intensely visible both in his activities, in his works, and in his later line of defense.
So, what exactly did Ross Ulbricht do? Well, from the current perspective, it's actually better to ask what he didn't do. From the very beginning of his young adulthood, Ross tried to engage in various businesses.
At first, he wanted to play on the stock market and create games, and when that didn't work out, he started an online bookstore called Goodwagon Books. And although this venture did not bring the desired success either, it laid the informal foundations for his business success, conquering the market where there is practically no competition. His libertarian views combined with interests and experience created an explosive mix that could only explode through the creation of a pioneering website project where your favorite substances are on sale this week. And it all took place already in February 2011. It was then that his greatest life's work officially began, the Silk Road website. The name of the site came from the historic Silk Road, a trade route connecting China, India, and Europe. Those are poetic truths. And equally poetic was his pseudonym as the administrator of the entire operation, which was Dread Pirate Roberts. This naming was borrowed directly from William Goldman's 1973 novel The Princess Bride, and it was a clever pseudonym in that it suggested the account could just as well be managed by several people, which Ross later tried to use in his defense, and which is equally a slight stretch because Dread Pirate Roberts mainly suited Ulbricht himself, because he was like a libertarian sower of freedom who only facilitated the sale of bad things, which however are not so bad because no harm falls upon the willing. He often posted his ideological paeans under his pseudonym on Silk Road. Hi everyone, I actually read more than I post on this forum, and when I do write something, it rarely concerns personal matters. For some strange reason, I'm in the mood to pause the revolution for a moment and share a few things with you. Everything happening behind the scenes of the service is shrouded in mystery. A lot of things happen very quickly and it's stressful, so I rarely get the chance to reflect on what we're doing here and how amazing it is. However, when I do get the chance to notice and appreciate it all, I am filled with inspiration and hope for a better tomorrow. Here's a small story about what inspires me. For years, I was frustrated and defeated by the insurmountable barriers between the current state and the world I desire. I searched long and hard for the truth about what is right and what is not, and generally about the good of humanity. I argued, discussed, learned, and read the works of great people in search of that truth. Everywhere I looked, I saw the state and the dreadful effects it brings to the human soul. It was all terribly depressing, like a trip from a wonderful dream to a small cage with no way out. But along the way, I also noticed other free spirits trying to rid themselves of chains, doing whatever they can to serve. I noticed magical and powerful goodness making itself known in the market, how it supports cooperation, politeness, and tolerance, how it coordinates everyone's actions on this planet, how it creates prosperity where nothing is wasted and where power and responsibility flow to those who deserve it. This is beyond human knowledge and comprehension. I found a better way, but I didn't know any way to get to it. Not long passed, maybe a year or two after this enlightenment, when the pieces began to come together, practically creating Silk Road. And what a journey it was. I no longer feel any frustration. In fact, I am calm knowing that every day I can do more to co-create and build a truly revolutionary and fully free market. I walk with my head held high. I walk free knowing that my actions remove the infrastructure that brings us oppression.
As you can see, Silk Road was not merely a source of income for Ross Ulbricht. It was not just a store from which he took a commission and went home with cash. It was a highly ideological project. It was his baby. However, this activity was not a charity, and money did not bother him either. Silk Road quickly started generating immense amounts of cash, especially since the site was developing very dynamically, constantly gaining new vendors and new customers.
At the height of its glory, the site offered services to over 100,000 merchants. A total of 1,299,465 transactions were conducted on the platform. This provided a turnover of over 9 million bitcoins and 614,000 bitcoins. For a period of 2.5 years, the service generated in this way $183 million in turnover and $13 million in profit based on the value of bitcoins at the time of the transaction. Due to the increase in the value of cryptocurrency over the years, many sources report figures in the billions of dollars. And although converting that to today's money values doesn't really make much sense, it proves that if Ross managed to hide any amount of cryptocurrency from the authorities somewhere, then after his current release from prison, he likely has nothing to complain about and won't have to do anything else in life.
However, this high life did not last long because investigators were already on Ross Ulbricht's tail for most of that time. All it took was finding a weak spot and catching Ross, preferably in the act.
Directly from the evidence materials in the investigation, it appears that the first mention of Silk Road was discovered on a forum for enthusiasts of all kinds of drugs, where a user named Altoid advertised the site as a recommended source as early as January 2011. Another, but probably the same Altoid, also advertised Silk Road on another Bitcoin forum. And a few months later, the same user Altoid on Bitcoin Talk was already looking for helpers for a big crypto project, providing the email for contact as rossulbricht@gmail.com. By then it was really just a matter of catching Ross in the act to make the case certain, and that's it. However, easier said than done. Along the way, Ulbricht dug himself in deeper because he ordered fake identity documents with his image from his own site, explaining that in fact anyone could have ordered these for him. Authorities were still intensely tracking Ulbricht monthly, and finally the right opportunity emerged. When he used a laptop in a public library in San Francisco, the agents orchestrated a couple's argument near him, so he would step away from his computer for a moment. The computer, which, if closed, would immediately encrypt all the data, and that is why the operation had to be so spontaneous. When Ross wasn't watching his computer, one of the FBI agents approached the screen and instantly took a now legendary photo. A photo of the administrative console of this pioneering darknet operation. And even then, without any doubt, Ross Ulbricht could have been arrested for running Silk Road. He was charged with a whole range of crimes, from conducting illegal activities, selling drugs, to money laundering.
However, running his illegal operation was not everything. Ross had several dark secrets, and the business he ran required him to take exceptionally extraordinary actions.
In private correspondence of the site administrator, investigators found that he was commissioning paid assassinations for various enemies of his interest, at least one of which was directly fabricated by FBI agents, and the rest were discovered only from received correspondence. And although these supposed murder contracts were a very sophisticated scam carried out on Dread Pirate robots, his intentions were real, and Ross truly believed, writing all those messages and commissioning what he commissioned, that he was the ultimate master of life and death. However, in this material, we will further focus on the verdict and Ulbricht's path to freedom.
The case of Ross Ulbricht began to be processed in January 2015, and in fact, Ross was already sentenced in May of that same year. 2 life sentences and 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, $183 million to pay as restitution for running this type of business, which amount was mainly based on the value of goods sold through his site.
The sentence was exceptionally harsh but crucial from the perspective of the pioneering nature of his actions. The first serious sentence related to this type of activity had to serve as a signal for others potentially following in his footsteps not to consider such a career. Investigators were especially displeased with the assassinations he commissioned, which I mentioned earlier. However, since ultimately no one was harmed, he never faced additional charges for them. But it certainly did not help in his attempts to reduce his sentence or get out of prison.
And there were many such attempts despite despite the fact that the final outcome was not guaranteed. Ross, along with his family and lawyers, fought intensely for a certain second chance.
Ulbricht appealed the sentence to the United States Court of Appeals as early as January 2016, pointing out, among other things, that the prosecution unlawfully concealed evidence of misconduct by DEA agents in the investigation concerning Silk Road, for which 2 agents were even duly convicted. The defense also argued that the sentence is exceptionally harsh, too harsh. Ultimately, the court did not agree with Ross's complaints, upholding the decision of the lower court. However, Ross did not give up. In December 2017, he filed a special petition to the United States Supreme Court, asking the court to reconsider his appeal regarding evidentiary issues and the sentence. In the petition for Ulbricht's case, the question was asked whether warrantless seizure of a person's internet traffic information without reasonable suspicion violates the 4th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and whether the 6th Amendment to the United States Constitution allows judges to find facts necessary for issuing an unjustified sentence. The 4th Amendment reads as follows: "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. A warrant can only be issued upon probable cause, supported by an oath or affirmation." And the 6th Amendment reads as follows: "In the prosecution of crimes, the accused has the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime was committed. The district must be determined by a law previously established." 21 independent experts related to the case submitted 5 opinions to support Ulbricht in court, including organizations such as the National Lawyers Guild, the American Black Cross, the Reason Foundation, the Drug Policy Alliance, and the Downsize DC Foundation. At the end of June 2018, the Supreme Court of the United States dismissed Ulbricht's complaint, refusing to reconsider his case. Along the way in 2020, a rumor emerged from a Vanity Fair article suggesting that Ross had rejected an offer to reduce his sentence to 10 years in exchange for key information. However, later Assistant Prosecutor Timothy Howard, co-responsible for handling the case, admitted that such a proposal never took place, nor was it ever suggested to Ross or his defense. However, Howard stated that a plea deal involving a minimum of 10 years in prison was indeed discussed at the last pretrial conference in December 2014. However, the maximum penalty of life imprisonment was strongly recommended based on the sentencing guidelines.
Between the appeals of the verdict, Ross and his defense were not idle. They constantly worked to make the case particularly prominent among libertarians, a favorable ground for Ross.
After Ross's arrest, his mother, Lynn Ulbricht, initiated a campaign for his sentence to be changed and for his early release. The Free Ross movement quickly gathered over 500,000 signatures in a petition. This campaign was particularly supported by libertarian politicians, advocates for prison reform, or members of the cryptocurrency community, many of whom viewed Ulbricht as a pioneer of Bitcoin, who introduced its widespread use through his Silk Road. In this way, for example, Libertarian Congressman Thomas Massie publicly called for Ulbricht's sentence to be reduced, and the Libertarian Reason Foundation raised funds for the activities of the Free Ross movement, and ultimately even the American Libertarian Party presidential candidate Joe Jorgensen advocated for his pardon. American Senator Rand Paul also supported Ross. Whether another independent presidential candidate, Robert Kennedy Jr., and many other politicians, activists, or businessmen with libertarian-leaning views. The entire list of those supporting the Free Ross movement can be found on the website freeross.org, where other materials defending Ulbricht can also be found. From the site, you can learn, for example, about the sentences of other criminals for similar acts. In such a way, the sellers of harmful substances on Ulbricht's site, or even the founders of Silk Road's successor, Silk Road 2.0, received much lighter sentences than the pioneer of darknet e-commerce himself. From the site, we also learned that Ross Ulbricht has worked hard on rehabilitation and has changed as a person and deserves a second chance. And besides, look at all these serious people who would like to embrace him.
Well, forgive me, but they just used the cheapest sociological tricks you can imagine, and the whole page really makes Rosa out to be some selfless angel, completely ignoring what he did. But that's how marketing works, and on the other hand, they couldn't write anything bad about Rose there, because that's how it is. The entire point of this page is to whitewash him in any way. But when you read all this, you have to keep in mind that he really thought for a moment that he was ordering the murders of other people. And if he were just put in such a situation, but without it being staged, he would probably still order it. Only real people would suffer from it.
But no, such a thing never happened at all, so let's forget about it. Look, Silk Road was his first conflict with the law, and all his charges are related to non-violent crimes.
But as you probably already know, because I spoiled it right at the beginning, Ross Ulbricht eventually got out of that prison. His efforts, those of his family, lawyers, and a multitude of fans from the libertarian bubble or other freedom-loving cryptocurrency enthusiasts were not in vain.
Because in concern for their votes, none other than Donald Trump decided that as soon as he becomes president in the year 2025, he will pardon Ross Ulbricht.
On day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
In practice, he fulfilled his promise from the 2024 National Libertarian Convention. That's exactly what happened. As of January 21st, 2025, Ross was formally a free man.
Last night, Donald Trump granted me a full pardon. I was doing life without parole. I was locked up for more than 11 years, but he let me out. I'm a free man now. So let it be known that Donald Trump is a man of his word. Thank you so much, President Trump, for giving me this amazing blessing. I'm so grateful to have my life back, to have my future back, to have this second chance.
However, the more astute might point out that since Ulbricht has been in prison at least since some year in 2015 and Trump began his first term already in 2016, why wasn't he pardoned earlier? Well, the Trump administration considered Ulbricht's earlier release, but ultimately it was deemed that it wasn't worth the risk at the time and might not sit well with the president's conservative voters, many of whom work in the services and police, and suddenly pardoning a cyber baron of bad substances. Besides, the Ulbricht case was a sort of example for others wanting to follow his footsteps, not to attempt it, and that's where these dilemmas arose. Besides, during Trump's first term, Ross's case was a fresh wound, appeals were ongoing, and Ulbricht was still serving a relatively short time for his offenses.
And now what? Well, I'm actually curious myself if Ross will ever make headlines again, and I really can't wait for the first interviews with him. Or maybe Ross will decide to be more quiet. Because of this acquittal, Ross is basically sentenced to a lifetime of being invited to various libertarian podcasts. He will definitely be on Joe Rogan and others like that. However, an additional curiosity is that it is very likely that Ross indeed has some hidden assets in cryptocurrencies.
Although he officially already had plenty of them, he decided to hand them over as restitution in the amount of $183 million for running his website. And during the proceedings, he also decided to give up the rest of the Bitcoin worth a modest few $billion according to current prices to fight for a better image before the courts and society. All because of the situation from 2021, when a new cache of over 50,000 bitcoins previously belonging to Rosa was discovered, which was seized from a hacker in November 2021. After they had been stolen from the Silk Road site during its heyday, it currently represents a value of several $1 billion. So it results in quite a significant difference, which will come under the care of the United States Department of Justice.
And what do you think about Ross Ulbricht's acquittal? Was his sentence even justified? What punishment would you impose on him, and would you ultimately agree to his acquittal? Be sure to let me know in the comments. I am curious to hear your opinions on this matter. Take care online. Thank you very much.